We're asking marriage to do something today that we never asked it to do before. We are asking marriage to answer all of our emotional, psychological, social, and sexual needs.
Divorce and the problem of having children out of wedlock is the central domestic problem of our time. And it's at the core of why America and Canada have so many problems in our culture.
Do you, Laura, take this man, Kyle?
I do.
You may kiss the bride.
Right now in America, we're going through this sort of matrimania culture where, marriage is positioned as the be-all and end-all.
Marriage is the biggest, most obvious problem that prosperous, at-peace industrial democracies have.
Everybody wants to get married. Divorced people want to get married. Gays and lesbians want to get married. Straight people want to get married. Everybody wants to get married.
Marriage is in trouble in the United States. In fact, it's in trouble in the Western world, and I think its loss and decline has been very tough on all of us.
Marriage is still a pretty strong institution that's not going to be going away anytime soon, but I think people's views of it are changing.
Society is changing very rapidly. There's been a liberalization of social mores across the board. You have gay and lesbian couples, you have cohabitation, you have people delaying marriage, you have people delaying childbirth, and all of those things, I think, really scare people into thinking that marriage is somehow on its deathbed. Which is definitely not the case. I think what you have now is a proliferation of viable choices, and that marriage is just one of those choices.
We need to recapture some ideas about marriage that we're losing. The basics of marriage are not going to change. It's really about a mother and a father coming together, loving each other, making a stable home for their children, and being happy together. That's what marriage is. That's what people want. But it's a lot less people are getting what they really want.
With the advent of the women's movement in the 70s, obviously women of my generation were raised with almost as many job opportunities as our male counterparts. So we don't need to marry to be supported. We can do that. And men aren't getting wives out of the equation anymore either. They're not getting someone who's going to stay home and take care of their house. So I think the growing pains are because we're trying to figure out why we're even making this kind of commitment.
We're in a period of adjustment where we're trying to figure out, well, great, we can have egalitarian marriages and we can have independent lives at the same time that we have an interdependent life. But I think that a lot of our social institutions and our political institutions have not necessarily caught up to that reality.
We're asking marriage to do something today that we never asked it to do before. And we're asking it increasingly. And that is, we are asking marriage to answer all of our emotional, psychological, social, and sexual needs. Well, marriage was not designed for that. And in fact, it's relatively new that we ask them to answer any needs at all, that we married for love in the first place. That idea is only a couple of 100 years old.
Do you love me?
I'm your wife.
I know. But do you love me?
I suppose I do.
And I suppose I love you too.
Historically, marriage itself was really a form of governance in the extent to which the husband had the right to command his wife. And also, marriage was viewed as very important to keep people's reproductive capacities in check, in the sense that making sure that dependent children who would result from sex between men and women would be taken care of by their parents. Also, to safeguard the transmission of private property has been a very important function of marriage. However, usually the political rhetoric about marriage and its necessity talks about homes, families, marriages as what any democratic representative society needs as its backbone, at least since the rise of the nation state in the 18th century. And I don't think that's going to go away very quickly.
Marriage has served us pretty well in one form or another for about 2,000 years. And it's hard, in a generation just to kill that. We're living through what, Eastern Europeans are living through after the collapse of communism and the Soviet Empire, that all our institutions were sort of smashed down, and we're now sort of trying to rebuild some of the things that we've lost. And I think out of this sort of rubble, you see men and women, again, trying to rebuild, I wouldn't say so much traditional relationships, they're almost neo-traditional relationships.
There's a trend towards getting married at a relatively early age among the current 20-something set, in a time where you can sort of be anyone, be anything. You have such a huge array of choices that people are looking for some kind of identity that they can just kind of latch onto. This is a generation that is profoundly turned off by government, by social movements, by traditional faiths in general, and they're looking for something that they can have faith in.
I'm actually not worried about the younger generation, because I think this younger generation, who are the children of the divorce revolution, are hell-bent on getting it right. This younger generation is facing a clergy. Most rabbis and ministers I know won't even think about marrying you before they put you through marital counseling. The fact that marriage takes hard work to make it go the distance is something young people are painfully aware of, and I was not.
I think everyone wants to get married, everyone, it's their dream. And it's there's this wedding fever, and people get caught up in it. I'm oh, maybe I should get married. 20. I'll be 21 this month. Everyone is getting married.
I think that when people think about getting married, they plan for the wedding and the dress and the guests and the cake,
the presents.
And the open bar, and the presents. And I think that they don't think past the wedding day.
I think that's nerve-wracking about our age right now. When are we old enough, or are we too young, or are we too old, and how do you know? And you go through all these, you go through high school boyfriends or girlfriends, college girlfriend or boyfriends, how do you pick and choose, and then how do you know when it's the right one?
I think it's kind of a part of the American dream to have, 2 kids, a dog, and a house in the suburbs, And I think marriage is a big part of the American dream.
Society really needs to think about the way we portray marriage in the media and in popular culture. Right now, we're living in this, matrimania era where everything about marriage is good and beautiful and wonderful, and people are very idealistic. You have Brides magazine. It's the biggest magazine ever, was this year's February-March issue. I think it weighed 6.5 pounds. It was 1,200 and something pages. You have celebrity weddings are constantly on the cover of InStyle magazine and People magazine. People look at marriage through these, starry eyes. I think that one of the ways that we could help people think about marriage and survive successfully within marriage is by portraying it realistically.
People
People change. I'm not the same person I was all those years ago.
Well, that's why relationships go sour.
Yeah, you hate change.
Sure, I hate change equals death.
Breaking up isn't hard to do. It's staying together that's tough these days. 6 out of 10 marriages now end in divorce in America. Scared? You should be.
In this culture, we are the most romantic we've ever been on the planet right now. We only get married because we're so in love. We are so in love, we're sure that we will defy the 50-50 odds because we're in love. So we get married for love. Why do we get divorced? Love died. Love just went and died. We're blameless, right? Bad luck. Crapshoot. We didn't have luck in love. And so now we're going to get divorced. Fine, except it just keeps happening. It's hard for every couple to keep it alive. It's a challenge, but if you know how to do it, it works.
A majority of divorces in America seem to be taking place among low-conflict couples. I don't want to minimize what they feel, but it's not hostile war zones in the home. It's more feelings of loneliness, estrangement, meaninglessness. And people who are in that point in their marriage very often project their feelings over an eternity, and it seems unbearable. And that's why I think the support and faith of outside others is really so important.
If you ever tell anyone you came to this workshop, tell them you've come to learn how to be abnormal. It is abnormal to say that you are living in a relationship that is safe and passionate. Most couples are either splitting and leaving the relationship, and the others who stay in it, if they're honest, are telling you the relationship is somewhat dissatisfying, to maybe even miserable. So you're here learning how to be abnormal.
Years a day. Teach you the orgasm. More exciting. Smile.
Most marriages are ordinary, just like most people's lives. After they get through a certain age, it just seems more ordinary than it has to be, and there's no reason to put up with an ordinary relationship.
Do you think that what you learned here could have prevented your other divorces?
That's a tough question. I took this with my ex-husband, and to me, it's one thing to take the course like this and learn the skills, but it takes two people willing to make changes and be responsive to each other.
The biggest problem is communications, and communications is what fosters intimacy, and we've been taught that it's sex that fosters, that you get intimacy from having sex. No, you get sex from having sex. You get intimacy from having communications.
There is a marriage renaissance underway, and one aspect of it is the movement that Harriet and I have been leading with regard to the religious sector. Churches, in most cases in the United States, are wedding factories. They grind out these weddings on Saturday without an awful lot of thought of whether they're going to work or not. There's no sense of responsibility to try to help the existing marriages in their church work. They have no idea what to do with the troubled marriages. They send them to therapists, and the therapists actually encourage divorce an awful lot of the time. And what we're saying is, no, you, the church, have got a responsibility to help hold those marriages together. What God has joined together, the church should hold together. Ideally, we try to create what we call a marriage savers church, a church that puts a safety net under every marriage in the church so that no one falls through. And if someone's in trouble, there's